Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Blesh. I'm an assistant professor here in SEAS, and my research focuses on how to manage agroecosystems for improved sustainability. I focus mostly on soil, carbon, and nitrogen cycles. And I'm delighted to introduce Harriet Friedmann, who joins us as a visiting scholar in SEAS and in the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative this semester. Harriet is a professor emerita of sociology at the University of Toronto. She publishes on many aspects of food and agriculture, but is particularly well known as co-developer of the historical food regimes approach. She was also chair of the well-known Toronto Food Policy Council in the 1990s and is presently a member of the council. And I met Harriet in 2009 when I was a graduate student taking a course called Sociology of Food and Ecology, where she was also participating as a visiting scholar. And Leslie Hui was also in this course, and we were both a bit starstruck. It was like having a celebrity join us in class, and her work has continued to deeply influence our thinking. So we're thrilled to have her here this semester, and I just want to say one fun fact. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan in the late 60s, and this was when innovation in interdisciplinary thinking was really occurring here, and so she was in the honors college and was able to construct her own degree that was called comparative history. Her favorite food is pesto made from her Toronto garden, and she'll be talking to us about modernity and the Hamburger.
Thank you. So we're going on a big journey here. Yes, got it? Right. Okay, so, no. Okay, I'm missing a few words there, but that's all right. The hamburger is a global meal made of discs of ground cow flesh between discs of ground wheat seeds. How did this become something eaten all over the world? Let's go back a few thousand years to where cattle came from in human diets. From the Middle East or Western Asia, aurochs, the extinct ancestors of cattle, migrated over thousands of years and thousands of miles to Europe, Africa, and South Asia, where they became distinct parts of domesticated families, including humans, cattle, and crops. Where did wheat come from in human diets? Wheat co-evolved with humans as they settled down together, starting also in the Middle East, moving as far west as Britain and as far east as China. Its ancestors, emmer and einkorn, are now rare. Neither modern wheat nor modern humans can live alone now. A big break came with colonial entry into the Americas, what Alfred Crosby calls the Columbian Exchange, or ecological imperialism. Starting in 1492, Columbus brought cattle and wheat on his ships to the Americas. Wheat grew very fast and then fell over. It was an early failure. However, cattle thrived. There were no large grazing animals in Latin America, in most of Latin America. European cattle ate their way across the Americas, completely changing ecosystems and undermining the indigenous cultures that depended on them. However, sometimes new mixed cultures of humans and cattle emerged. These included New World breeds of cattle, like this Corriente bull, and new mixed cultures that were as different as gauchos in Argentina and village cattle in Mexico. A huge second break came with industry, especially the railways. In Chicago after 1860, cattle became organized as an industry. These images show stockyards in 1879, boilers to remove hair from skin, and cattle pens in 1890. The same thing happened to wheat. Settlers came with railroads. Land was taken from indigenous people, and indigenous bison were massacred. Land was surveyed into square homesteads along railways for Europeans to settle. Old World immigrants plowed the land for the first time to plant annual wheat in place of perennial native grasses. The hamburger was made possible by industrial organization, such as grain elevators, and new financial instruments, such as futures markets, where contracts on future harvests could be bought and sold at the new Chicago Board of Trade. How were the prairies organized before they became monocultural fields and cattle feedlots? There was an indigenous triad of perennial grasses, bison, and indigenous people who managed vast herds, and grasslands. This triad was replaced by a simplified, introduced triad of annual grasses, grazing cattle, and European farmers using techniques such as plowing, which were more appropriate to their very different ancestral homelands. Using techniques for cleared forest, they mined the fertility stored over millennia in grasslands. Only a century and a half later, the situation is dangerous. Neo-Europes, where grain production is concentrated, seem natural but are not sustainable. Countries across the world are now dependent on importing the grains of colonized grasslands. They lost their own diverse farming systems, which make their landscapes distinct and which are the basis for distinct cuisines. The temptation of people who could no longer sell their crops or buy traditional ingredients was to embrace instead the modern foods introduced from distant places, that is, American and corporate cuisines, such as the hamburger. Oops. However, there's hope. People have always repaired the gap to make their own cultures. In the shadow of colonial and capitalist simplifications, people have renewed and created diverse biocultural landscapes and cuisines. For instance, the national dish of Jamaica is made of transplanted African ackee and rice, plus salt fish from the North Atlantic imported since slave days. Ancient Chinese rice terraces now grow hybrid rice. In southern Brazil, and Neo-Europe, like North America, farms grow mixtures of wheat, cattle, vegetables, and vines. And best of all, in the middle, agroecological breeders are creating perennial grains that promise to make the grassland sustainable once again. Thank you.